First, we need to evaluate the limitations and contradictions of service dogs. This is a critical perspective. But we need to question the effectiveness of service dogs, which would entail understanding that there is a lot of bias in research on them and their purported efficacy, just in general. And finally, we should be exploring technological alternatives to service dogs.
Welcome to the one space on the planet that's so clean dog nutters can't stand it. No! If you're sick of dog culture, then you've come to the right place. Without further ado, I welcome you to this fight for change. Fight for change.
The presence of dogs in public spaces has been a topic of discussion for quite some time. Those of us in the anti-dog community would like to see a return to a time when dogs were seldom, if ever, seen in public. And ultimately, we would prefer it if the entire practice of dog keeping, for all purposes, would simply fall out of favor entirely. It's unfortunate that this topic is such a contentious one. It's also a shame that I should probably preface by stating that this is not an attack on people with disabilities. This should not be such a sensitive issue, but believe it or not, these service dogs are a protected interest with heavy and widespread promotion and acceptance. Or, as one Redditor noted,
service dogs are the sacred cow of this industry and have been the impetus to force more dogs into public spaces. It's resulted in a massive increase of dogs in homes, schools, hospitals, and anywhere they can get a foothold.
While dogs are not an uncommon sight in residential streets and parks, there was a time when dogs in parks, main streets, and squares were a rare sight. Dog parks were the sole exception, but today it seems many ordinary parks have been turned into dog parks. In the past, one could avoid these owned animals by simply avoiding parks designated for that purpose. In addition to many parks being completely overrun with them, it is not so out of the ordinary today to see dogs in civic buildings like libraries and museums and in transportation hubs such as train stations and airports. And it has become increasingly difficult to find or frequent any area that's completely devoid of dogs. It seems evident that a large factor in this new norm is the increasing prevalence and widespread acceptance of service dogs in particular. More on that a little later.
There are multiple issues with the existence of these dogs specifically. Although their intended purpose is to assist individuals with disabilities, there are growing concerns over their increasing prevalence. What's more, the sheer amount of dogs in general has multiplied rapidly and is growing uncontrollably, like weeds in a field. Similar to working dogs, these supposed service animals are arguably no longer the best that can be done. And the fact is that regardless of how it is dressed up, a dog is simply out of place in various locations where such can now be found often. In opposing the presence of dogs in public spaces, I myself do not make a special exception for certain kinds of dogs. However, it seems there is a split on this issue, even within the dog-critical community. The question is whether only highly trained service dogs should be allowed in public, or whether it should be the case that no dogs allowed means no dogs allowed, no exceptions.
I want to comment on this. Well, this comment. It reads as follows.
This is all irrelevant. I could care less if the dog supplies someone with oxygen to survive. Don't bring them in the grocery store.
I mean, I low-key feel the exact same way. Actually, not just low-key. We should not be afraid or ashamed to call it like it is.
Because you see, by linking the use of dogs with disabilities and the disabled, it has been made taboo to even question something as simple and common sense as barring dogs from certain spaces. And what we really ought to do is the following.
First, we need to evaluate the limitations and contradictions of service dogs. This is a critical perspective. But we need to question the effectiveness of service dogs, which would entail understanding that there is a lot of bias in research on them and their purported efficacy, just in general. And finally, we should be exploring technological alternatives to service dogs.
The world is falling apart around us. Dog culture is a symptom of a very pervasive and pernicious social rot, especially in its current form. The presence of dogs has been so normalized and so deeply ingrained in society that now some people feel entitled to demand special privileges, which include the expectation of being able to bring unpredictable predatory mammals into other people's vehicles. More on that shortly. The good news is that, unlike challenging the broader socio-economic paradigm, as an example, getting rid of dogs does not require an alternative vision for a different kind of society. The only difference is the absence of dogs, and many of the overwhelming benefits of a post-dog existence would be felt instantly. And of course, I've made statements on the whole service dog craze before. There's always more that can be said, but here I am taking a hardline stance. To quote an online comment,
Service dogs are the new snake oil. They are a total scam, and their special protections should end. They're scumbag owners' fake disabilities to get special treatment.
but wait. Let's go back a bit. So, beyond the glaring and widely acknowledged issue of fake service dogs, these are literal pet dogs passed off as service dogs. There are these important considerations, and this really must be hammered home. What service dogs are today is a loophole which allows dog owners far and wide to gain access to places where animals are not ordinarily allowed, and by claiming service animal, they are able to avoid fees, often due to the lack of a federal requirement for service dogs to be certified or registered.
With regard to limitations, the simple fact is that the question of whether service dogs are actually necessary for people with disabilities has not been answered. Not by proponents of dog culture as a whole, service dogs or dogs kept as pets and for other purposes in general. Or at the very least, we can confidently say that this core question is rarely addressed or dealt with directly. Going back to where I referenced a split of sorts, even within the anti-dog space, so for instance, the dog-free subreddit, there are a few who accept the service dog paradigm, even though they fully acknowledge how problematic dogs are, in addition to the fact that they don't belong in public spaces. But recently I found this thread where the question of whether service dogs are actually necessary for individuals with disabilities is presented. Of course, if you look at the phrasing, you will notice that there seems to be an assumption that at least some of them are. Note also how this poster also felt the need to state for the public record that they are not against those who are disabled. This is a depressingly common thing to encounter in the context of a questioning of the service dog paradigm. Immediately, we are accused of being ableist, when what we are actually opposing is the presence of dogs in society. I even did a video a while back highlighting this type of dishonesty. I've since unlisted the video, meaning it's sort of hidden, but that anyone with a link can view it. And I will throw it up in the video description for reference, so be sure to check there.
So, the Nightshade Prince is in complete denial about how destructive, disruptive, and dangerous dogs in apartment complexes are. Instead of providing an actual argument in favor of dogs being allowed in apartments, this apologist has now switched to telling me I hate disabled people. You really can't make this stuff up. Note, he ignored all of this twice. Everything I wrote here, in response to their red herring about landlords being cheapskates, it was ignored. But this red herring was in response to my video, which contained the same information, and which was also ignored.
What I find especially interesting about this post is some of the studies that are referenced.
For instance,
this Epilepsy Foundation article states that there's no scientific studies to prove how dogs can sense oncoming seizures. What medical device goes out on the market before there's a 100% understanding of how that medical device works?
And as you can see by reading threads like this one, these dog defenders who claim they actually need a service dog with them in public never seem to be able to explain any real necessity. I'm not going to narrate this one, but if you read it, it is pretty hilarious. One thing I will say is that I have never once seen a dog do anything in public for the owner, whether it had a vest on or whether it was supposed to be a service mutt or not. Obviously, a dog can't help someone shop or eat. So right off the bat, you know that the idea of a dog inside supermarket or restaurant is preposterous. But perhaps the worst thing about all of this is the fact that the things these apologists claim they need dogs for, these are all things people or technological alternatives could easily assist with, and much more effectively. Consider this example. So, this dog defender claims that one of the reasons to have a service dog is, for instance, if someone in a wheelchair lives alone and can't pick something up off the floor without risk of falling, supposedly one of these mutts can just get it for them. My response was as follows. I mean, damn. If only there was a long-handled tool with a trigger-operated gripper that allows users to pick items up without bending or stretching, maybe something like a trash picker-upper. Someone should really invent something like this. I've seen these examples where dogs supposedly grab items for people, but I, for one, would not want things I drop to be covered in dog slobber. Or food items I'm purchasing. Would you? Then, of course, this nutter tries to claim that dogs detect seizures or whatever, and as I mentioned here, the pros of non-living tools, including something as simple as a trash picker-upper, are many, as opposed to all the cons that come along with using a dog for such instead.
And of course, there's always the gaslighting. As with this comment.
It's also worth mentioning that a lot of the people involved with the research on these service dogs often set out to prove that dogs can do certain things, and that simply is not how science is done. As for contradictions, well, they're pretty obvious. Putting aside other risks, for instance, attack or contamination, allergies to dogs can be severe, and when a person with a dog allergy is shafted because another one claims to have a disability they need a beast for, that is one disability or condition being prioritized over another, assuming the person with the supposed service animal actually has a disability. Because as mentioned previously, it is very easy to lie or fake a disability just to be able to say you need a dog because of it.
It's also kind of funny, the idea of requiring something that is said to provide a service for you, which itself actually requires many services to be sustained. Let's have a look at this Reddit thread. This post, from a year ago or so, is titled, "Apparently Uber drivers with dog allergies have no choice but to tolerate service dogs."
So apparently it's Uber policy that you have to allow service dogs in your car, and they explicitly say that fear of dogs or allergies towards dogs isn't a valid reason. I was considering driving for Uber this summer to get some extra side income, but if that means I have no choice but to tolerate dogs entering my personal space on pains of termination and potentially even being vulnerable to a lawsuit under the service dog provisions of the ADA, that's a hard pass. I don't even have dog allergies. I just don't like how in many places in the United States, it's just common and popularly accepted that you need to tolerate dogs crossing your personal boundaries regardless of your consent.
There are so many issues with the whole service dog thing. The main problem is that it's somehow still a thing at all. The fact that people with disabilities are targeted for the sake of profit, and thereby convinced that they actually need a dog instead of actual medical equipment, medicine, support, or therapy. That is a big part of it, and ultimately the core issue is, as always, the presence of dogs itself. Another glaring problem with it is that these days it is very easy for dog people to abuse the system, to lie and just say that whatever dog they have is a service animal, whether it is or not. And, as was just noted, there is no proofing system or any mechanism by which to compel a person claiming to have a service dog to prove it. What's more, these days, dogs are said to be able to help people with more and more tasks, and what we should be seeing, in any event, is a significant reduction in the amount of service dogs in existence, rather than an increase. It's not just that any joker with a beast in tow can say that their dog is a service dog, although sometimes it is readily apparent when an ungovernable beast cannot possibly be one of these well-trained mutts. It's that people are buying into the very idea of service dogs, and that this trend seems to be on the rise. Thank you for watching. This has been K Unofficial.